Dr. Elena Vasquez had always believed that the universe's greatest joke was making her an insomniac who studied quantum entanglement for a living. 3 in the morning found her hunched over her workstation at the European Quantum Communications Facility, nursing her 4th espresso and wondering why she'd chosen a career that required her to think about particles that existed in multiple states simultaneously. Her brain barely functioned in one state at this hour. The alert chime that shattered the lab silence wasn't supposed to exist. The Quantum Entanglement Communication Array was designed to receive signals from Earth-based stations only. Moscow, Beijing, Sydney, nowhere more exotic than that. But the readings scrolling across her screen suggested something was trying to talk to them from 47 light years away, and it was screaming. "Okay, universe," Elena muttered, pulling up the signal analysis. "What fresh hell is this?" The data stream hit her like a freight train made of mathematics. Centuries of observational data, compressed into quantum packets that somehow contained more information than should have been physically possible. Star charts dating back to the Renaissance. Detailed biological scans of Earth population growth. Cultural analysis that read like the world's most invasive doctoral thesis on human civilization. And buried in all of it, a message that made Elena's blood run cold. "We have been watching. We need your help. They are coming for us next." Elena stared at the screen for a full minute, then did what any rational scientist would do. She ran the analysis again. Same result. She checked for equipment malfunctions. Everything was operating normally. She even slapped herself because apparently her sleep-deprived brain thought that was a legitimate troubleshooting technique. The signal was real, alien, and desperate. 3 hours later, Elena found herself in a conference room that probably cost more than her annual salary, surrounded by people whose security clearances were higher than her credit score. General Patricia Hayes sat at the head of the table, looking like she'd been preparing for this conversation her entire career. Director James Chun from NASA kept checking his tablet, as if the alien message might disappear if he looked away. And Dr. Sarah Kim from the Department of Defense was taking notes like her life depended on it. "Let me understand this correctly," General Hayes said, her voice carrying the kind of calm that Elena suspected came from years of preparing for impossible scenarios. "You received a transmission from an alien civilization that has been observing Earth for centuries, and they're asking for help against some kind of invasion force." "That's the simplified version, yes," Elena replied. "The complicated version involves quantum entanglement principles that would take me 3 hours to explain and make everyone in this room question reality." "I'm already questioning reality," Director Chen muttered. "Aliens have been watching us since Leonardo da Vinci was painting the Mona Lisa, and they want our help? What could we possibly offer a civilization advanced enough to send quantum messages across interstellar space?" Elena pulled up the cultural analysis section of the transmission. According to their data, they've been fascinated by what they call our beautiful contradictions. We're apparently the only species they've encountered that can compose symphonies and design cluster bombs with equal passion. They find us incomprehensible. Incomprehensible how? Dr. Kim asked. "Well, their analysis suggests that most intelligent species follow predictable patterns of development. They either become purely logical and peaceful, or purely aggressive and self-destructive. We're apparently unique in being both simultaneously." They cite the fact that we invented jazz and nuclear weapons within 50 years of each other as evidence of our delightful insanity. General Hayes leaned forward. "And they think this insanity will help them how?" Before Elena could answer, the quantum array chimed again. The signal was stronger this time, more focused. Elena patched it through to the conference room's display system, and suddenly they were looking at something that definitely wasn't human. The being on the screen was tall, elegant, with features that seemed to shift between familiar and alien depending on the angle. Its skin had a faint iridescent quality, and its eyes held an intelligence that was both ancient and desperate. "Greetings, people of Earth," it said in accented but perfect English. "I am Ambassador Kethvar of the Nurethi Collective. I apologize for the intrusion, but we find ourselves in circumstances that require unconventional solutions. Elena noticed that everyone in the room had gone very still. Meeting your first alien apparently had that effect on people. We have observed your species for 643 of your years, HFY continued. Initially, we believed you to be a developing civilization that would follow standard evolutionary patterns. We were wrong. You are possibly the most paradoxical species we have encountered. You create beauty while embracing chaos. You show compassion while perfecting cruelty. You are, by all our models, impossible. Thanks, Elena said weakly. It is a compliment, HFY assured her, and it is why we need your help. The Kryvax Dominion approaches our borders. They are a reptilian empire that has conquered 43 star systems using a simple strategy. They break their enemies will to fight before the first shot is fired. They study their targets, identify their psychological weaknesses, and exploit them with surgical precision. Most species surrender before the invasion begins. General Hayes found her voice. And you think we can help because you have no psychological weaknesses in the traditional sense, HFY said. You have psychological everything. You are emotionally chaotic, strategically unpredictable, and apparently incapable of accepting defeat, even when it is mathematically certain. The Kryvax will not know how to break what they cannot understand. Elena felt a laugh bubbling up in her chest. So you want us to help fight an interstellar empire because we're too stubborn to quit? Essentially, yes. The room fell silent. Elena looked around at the faces of some of the most powerful people on Earth and realized they were all thinking the same thing. This was either the greatest opportunity in human history or the fastest way to get the entire planet killed. What exactly are you asking for? General Hayes said finally. Military consultation. Strategic partnership. Your unique perspective on warfare. HFY's expression shifted, becoming somehow more vulnerable. We are not warriors, General Hayes. We are philosophers, artists, builders. The Kryvax are efficient. They will strip our worlds of resources and our people of hope. We have perhaps 1 year before they reach our core systems. Elena watched the general's face change as the implications sank in. This wasn't just about helping aliens anymore. This was about humanity's first steps into a larger galaxy, and apparently, that galaxy was at war. If we agree to help, Dr. Kim said carefully, what resources would you provide in return? Everything, HFY said simply. Our technology, our knowledge, our manufacturing capabilities. We will help you reach the stars, and in return, you'll help us remain free. Elena felt something shift in the room's atmosphere. The impossible was becoming possible, and everyone could sense it. General Hayes stood up. Ambassador HFY, I need to consult with world leaders before we can give you an answer. But I want you to understand something about humans. Yes, when someone calls for help, we tend to answer, even when it's a terrible idea. Especially when it's a terrible idea. The general's smile was sharp as a blade. Give us 72 hours. As the transmission ended and the conference room erupted into urgent conversations, Elena stared at the now-blank screen and wondered what they had just gotten themselves into. One cry for help from across the galaxy, and suddenly humanity was about to become players in an interstellar war. She had a feeling they were about to prove just how beautifully contradictory they could be. 6 months after first contact, Colonel Jack Morrison stood in what used to be the International Space Station and tried not to laugh at the absurdity of his life. The station had been expanded into something that looked like a military base designed by someone who'd watched too many sci-fi movies and had unlimited funding. Nurethi technology gleamed alongside human engineering in a way that should have been impossible but somehow worked perfectly. Sir, the quantum communication array is picking up Kryvax scout signals near Jupiter, Sergeant Maria Santos reported, her voice crackling through the comm system. 3 ships, standard reconnaissance formation. Morrison nodded, watching the tactical display light up with alien contacts. 3 months of intensive training with Nurethi advisors had taught him everything he needed to know about Kryvax strategy. They were methodical, logical, and completely predictable. which meant they were about to get a very unpleasant surprise. "Dr. Tanaka, are you getting this?" he asked. Dr. Yuki Tanaka's voice came through from the research station, tinged with the excitement of someone who'd spent her career studying theoretical xenobiology and was now watching it become very practical very quickly. "The psychological profiles are fascinating, Colonel. Their formation suggests they're conducting standard threat assessment protocols. They expect us to either hide or posture defensively." "Good thing we're not standard," Morrison replied. Santos prepped the Trojan Horse Protocol. What happened next would probably be studied in military academies for the next century, assuming there were still military academies after this war. Instead of hiding or mounting a traditional defense, Morrison ordered 3 modified cargo vessels to approach the Kryvac scouts on what appeared to be a direct collision course. The ship's quantum signatures were masked to look like panicked civilian vessels fleeing toward Jupiter's moons. The Kryvacs did exactly what their psychological profiles suggested they would. They moved to intercept and capture the fleeing ships for interrogation. Standard procedure for gathering intelligence on a new species. They weren't expecting the cargo containers to open and release clouds of modified space debris programmed with new Rethi guidance systems and human-designed explosive charges. More importantly, they weren't expecting the panicked civilians to suddenly execute a coordinated pincer movement that would have made Sun Tzu proud. "Contact in 30 seconds, Santos reported from the lead vessel. "Kryvac's ships are attempting to establish communication protocols." "Let them talk," Morrison said. "But don't answer." "Tanaka, what's their psychological state?" "Confused," came the reply. "Their communication patterns suggest they're trying to categorize us according to known behavioral models. We're not fitting any of them." The engagement lasted exactly 4 minutes and 17 seconds. When it was over, 2 Kryvac ships were disabled and drifting, and the third was limping back toward the outer system with what Morrison imagined was a very confusing report to file. "Well," Morrison said, watching the tactical display, "that was educational." 3 weeks later, Morrison found himself standing on the surface of Valthera, a new Rethi colony world that had been under Kryvac's occupation for 6 months. The liberation mission was supposed to be a careful, methodical operation designed to minimize civilian casualties and demonstrate human tactical capabilities. Instead, it had turned into something that could only be described as organized chaos. Sergeant Santos emerged from a building that had been a Kryvac's command post 5 minutes earlier, her armor scorched, but her expression satisfied. "Building secured, sir." "The Kryvac's garrison is confused." "Confused how?" "Well, they keep asking why we're not following proper siege protocols. Apparently, we were supposed to surround the city, demand surrender, and then engage in formal combat if they refused. Instead, we just walked in through the storm drains and started having polite conversations with their soldiers." Morrison had to admit the polite conversation strategy had been Dr. Tanaka's idea, and it was working better than anyone had expected. Instead of treating the Kryvacs as enemies to be destroyed, human forces were treating them as confused middle managers who'd gotten caught up in a hostile corporate takeover. "Let me understand this," Morrison had said when Tanaka first proposed it. "You want us to approach psychological warfare specialists with customer service techniques." "Think about it," Tanaka had replied. "The Kryvac system is based on rigid hierarchy and fear. What happens when you respond to intimidation with genuine concern for their well-being?" The answer, it turned out, was that you completely broke their psychological warfare protocols. Kryvac soldiers who expected to be fighting desperate defenders instead found themselves in conversations with humans who seemed genuinely worried about their health and job satisfaction. Morrison watched as Private Johnson approached a group of captured Kryvac soldiers with a first aid kit and what appeared to be genuine concern. "Are you guys okay?" Johnson was asking. "That explosion looked pretty rough. Do you need water? We've got these energy bars that are supposed to be universal nutrition, but honestly, they taste like cardboard." The Kryvac soldiers stared at him with what Morrison was learning to recognize as the reptilian equivalent of complete bewilderment. "This is not standard protocol," one of them said in halting English. Yeah, well, we're not really big on standard anything, Johnson replied cheerfully. Your commanding officer seemed really stressed when we captured him. Is he always that anxious? Because we've got some meditation apps that might help. Morrison's comm system crackled to life. Colonel, this is Dr. Tanaka. I'm monitoring the psychological profiles of the Kryvax prisoners, and something interesting is happening. Define interesting. They're starting to question their own command structure. Turns out, when you respond to authoritarian intimidation with genuine empathy, it creates a kind of cognitive dissonance. Several of them have asked if they can speak to our psychological warfare specialists because they're concerned about their mental health. Morrison felt a grin spreading across his face. You're telling me we're accidentally providing therapy to enemy soldiers? It's more complex than that, but essentially yes. And it's working. We've had 3 voluntary surrenders in the past hour, and 2 Kryvax officers have asked if we have any job openings. The liberation of Valethra was completed in 18 hours with 0 civilian casualties and minimal damage to infrastructure. More importantly, it ended with a significant portion of the Kryvax garrison requesting asylum and asking detailed questions about human employment benefits. Morrison stood in the colony's central plaza, watching New Rethi civilians emerge from hiding to embrace their liberators. Children who had never seen humans before were offering them flowers and asking if they could touch their strange, non-scaly skin. Colonel, Santos said, approaching with a tablet full of after-action reports, I've been analyzing the engagement data. And, sir, I don't think the Kryvax understand what they're up against. Their entire strategic doctrine is based on the assumption that intelligent species behave logically. We just liberated a fortified position by being aggressively friendly to the defenders. Morrison nodded, watching as Dr. Tanaka emerged from the former command center with a group of Kryvax officers who looked like they were having an existential crisis. The real question, Morrison said, is what happens when word of this gets back to their high command. As if summoned by his words, the quantum communication array on his wrist chimed with an incoming message from Earth. General Hayes' voice cut through the static with news that made Morrison's blood run cold and his tactical mind start racing. All units, be advised. Long-range sensors are detecting a massive Kryvax fleet mobilizing in the Outer Rim. Estimated arrival at Earth in 6 weeks. This is no longer a limited engagement. Repeat, this is no longer a limited engagement. Morrison looked around at the liberated colony, at the confused but grateful New Rethi civilians, at the defecting Kryvax soldiers who were asking about Earth's healthcare system, and at his own troops who had just proven that sometimes the best way to win a war was to completely ignore how wars were supposed to work. Well, he said to Santos, looks like we're about to find out what happens when an unstoppable force meets an immovable object that refuses to admit it's supposed to be immovable. Santos grinned. Sir, with respect, I think we're about to show them that humans don't just move immovable objects. We convince them to move themselves. As the implications of the approaching fleet sank in, Morrison realized that Earth was about to face its first real test as a galactic power. And knowing humans, they were probably going to approach it in the most beautifully, chaotically, impossibly human way imaginable. The universe was about to learn what happened when you asked humanity for help and then threatened their new friends. Admiral Chin-Lu had commanded naval operations for 15 years, but she'd never had to coordinate a defense fleet that included retrofitted cruise ships, asteroid mining platforms, and what appeared to be a luxury yacht owned by a tech billionaire who'd insisted on mounting railguns to his hot tub deck. Earth's orbital defense grid looked like it had been designed by a committee of military strategists, science fiction writers, and people who'd had way too much coffee. Admiral, we're receiving the Kryvax ultimatum. Communications Officer Rodriguez reported from his station aboard the command vessel Defiant. They're demanding immediate surrender and offering us therapy? Chen blinked. Come again. Apparently, they've analyzed our recent military actions and concluded that humanity is suffering from a collective psychological disorder. They're offering to provide treatment for our pathological inability to acknowledge defeat in exchange for peaceful submission. Elena Vasquez, now serving as the liaison between human and Nurethi forces, snorted from her position at the tactical display. 6 months ago, I was a sleep-deprived quantum physicist. Now I'm watching aliens offer group therapy to an entire planet. My life has become a very weird movie. What's our response? Chen asked. Elena grinned. I took the liberty of drafting something. Quote, "Thank you for your concern regarding our mental health. We appreciate the offer, but must respectfully decline therapy. However, we'd be happy to provide you with some anxiety management techniques, as your fleet formation suggests you're extremely stressed. We've also prepared a care package of Earth music and comfort food. Please enjoy responsibly." End quote. Chen stared at her. You responded to an alien invasion ultimatum with a care package offer? Hey, it worked on Valethra. The quantum communication array crackled to life with the voice of Dr. Tanaka, now stationed on Luna Base with the expanded xenopsychology team. Admiral, I'm monitoring Kryvak's fleet communications, and their psychological state is fascinating. They're exhibiting what can only be described as command paralysis. They don't know how to respond to enemies who keep trying to help them. Admiral Chen pulled up the tactical display, showing the approaching Kryvak's armada. 300 ships arranged in perfect formation, following textbook invasion protocols. It should have been terrifying. Instead, it looked almost quaint in its predictability. War Chief Zeth Karn is demanding direct communication, Rodriguez reported. He seems agitated. The main screen flickered to life, revealing a massive reptilian figure whose scales seemed to shimmer with barely contained fury. His eyes held the kind of intelligence that had conquered star systems. But there was something else there now. Confusion, frustration, and what Elena was beginning to recognize as the universal expression of someone whose carefully laid plans were being completely ignored. I am War Chief Zeth Karn of the Kryvak's Dominion, the alien announced, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to having entire species tremble at his words. You will explain your actions. Chen stepped forward. Admiral Chen Lu, Earth Defense Force. Which action specifically are you referring to, War Chief? Your soldiers refuse to follow proper combat protocols. Your tactics make no strategic sense. Your response to our psychological warfare is to offer us recreational substances and ask about our feelings. Zeth Karn's voice rose with what Elena was pretty sure was the alien equivalent of exasperation. What manner of species are you? Human, Chen replied simply. Look, War Chief, we understand this is probably frustrating for you. Conquest is your job, and we're not making it easy. But here's the thing about humans. We don't really do easy well. We tend to overcomplicate everything. Elena watched the War Chief's expression shift through several emotions that didn't have human equivalents. Behind him, she could see other Kryvak's officers engaged in what looked like heated discussions. The perfect unity of the Dominion was showing cracks. You cannot defeat our fleet, Zeth Karn stated. We outnumber you significantly. Oh, absolutely, Chen agreed cheerfully. On paper, this should be a massacre. But you know what's funny about humans? We have this really bad habit of not reading the fine print. That's when Earth unleashed hell, and it looked nothing like what anyone expected. Instead of engaging the Kryvak's fleet in traditional battle formation, human forces scattered across the solar system like dandelion seeds in a hurricane. Asteroid mining ships suddenly revealed hidden weapon systems. Luxury space yachts began broadcasting what appeared to be a galactic-wide live stream of the battle. Defunct satellites came online as improvised kinetic weapons. But the real masterstroke was the social media campaign. Admiral, Elena reported, barely containing her laughter. We're getting responses from 17 different star systems. Apparently, our live stream of confused Kryvak soldiers asking about Earth's healthcare benefits has gone viral across half the galaxy. The main display lit up with incoming communications from species Chun had never heard of. The Zinthri Collective wanted to know if humans offered consulting services for resistance movements. The Vectau Republic was asking for tips on psychological warfare. 3 different species had requested copies of Earth's entertainment media after watching Kryvak's officers debate the philosophical implications of human kindness. "This is impossible," Zethkarn snarled over the communication channel. "You cannot fight a war through social media." "Watch us," Chen replied. What followed wasn't so much a battle as it was the universe's first crowdsourced revolution. Human forces didn't just fight the Kryvax, they made the fight into content. Every engagement was broadcast, every confused Kryvax reaction was analyzed and shared, every human tactical improvisation was turned into a how-to guide for overthrowing authoritarian regimes. Elena watched the tactical display as reports poured in from across the galaxy. Rebellion was breaking out on Kryvax-controlled worlds. Client species were demanding renegotiation of tribute agreements. 3 Kryvax regional commanders had apparently defected after watching human soldiers share their lunch with captured enemies. "Admiral," Dr. Tanaka's voice crackled through the comm, "I'm detecting massive disruptions in Kryvax fleet coordination. Their command structure is, I think the technical term is having a collective nervous breakdown." Elena pulled up the psychological analysis data and felt her jaw drop. "Chun, you need to see this. The Kryvax system is completely collapsing. Their entire social order is based on the assumption that intelligent species follow predictable patterns. We've basically proven that their fundamental worldview is wrong." On the main screen, War Chief Zethkarn was arguing with his own officers. The perfect hierarchy of the Dominion was fracturing in real time as subordinates began questioning orders, demanding explanations, and in at least one case, asking if they could request asylum on Earth. "War Chief," Chun said, her voice cutting through the chaos on the Kryvax bridge, "I'm going to make you an offer." "You are in no position to make offers," Zethkarn replied, but his voice lacked its earlier conviction. "We'll teach you," Chun said simply, "everything we know about adaptation, improvisation, and dealing with chaos. In exchange, you stop conquering people and start asking nicely if you need something." The silence that followed stretched across the solar system. Elena could practically hear the gears of galactic civilization shifting. "You would offer assistance to those who came to destroy you?" Zethkarn asked finally. "It's kind of our thing," Elena interjected. "We're really bad at holding grudges when someone asks for help. Fair warning, though, our educational system is going to be very confusing for you. We encourage students to question authority." 6 hours later, the most powerful invasion fleet in recent galactic history officially requested permission to surrender. Not because they were defeated, but because they wanted to understand how humans had turned a war into a galaxy-wide educational seminar on the benefits of chaotic good governance. Elena stood in the observation deck of the Defiant, watching Kryvax ships being escorted to lunar quarantine facilities where they would undergo what was being diplomatically termed cultural exchange programs. Her quantum communication array was lighting up with messages from dozens of species requesting consultation, assistance, or simply asking if Earth offered online courses in applied human stubbornness. "So," Chun said, joining her at the viewport, "we accidentally started a galactic revolution, turned our enemies into students, and made friends with half the known universe. All because someone 47 light-years away asked for help." Elena nodded, thinking about the message that had started it all, one desperate cry for help in the early morning hours of what felt like a lifetime ago. "You know what the really scary part is?" "What?" "We're probably just getting started. There's a whole galaxy out there full of people who think impossible problems require logical solutions." Elena grinned, watching the stars. They have no idea what they're in for. As if summoned by her words, the communication array chimed with another incoming message from a distant star system. Another species, another impossible situation, another request for the kind of help that only humans seemed capable of providing. Elena Vasquez, former insomniac physicist turned galactic diplomatic liaison, looked at the message and started laughing. The universe had called for help, and humanity had answered in the most beautifully, chaotically, impossibly human way imaginable. And they were just getting started.